Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. We got a great interview for you today. Before we dive in, make sure you check out the website over at b2brevenue.com. And if you happen to see some of my content fly by on LinkedIn, please give it a like, comment, and share. I'll sum up the interview at the end, and here we go. Here we go. Hey, Kevin, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Background, well, I normally describe myself as a salesperson. I used to say salesman, but that's got different connotations now. My original interest in selling stemmed from the fact that my father was a salesman, actually. He worked for a radar company back in the 60s, and he had this very exotic job. It seemed very exotic to a small boy in 1969, because he used to get to go to America. Wow, can you imagine this?
My favorite country.
Exactly. Now, this is in the 60s, and I remember he would go to America, and he'd come back with these wonderful presents for his young son, and fill me with stories about this new country he'd been to. And I just found the whole thing so thrilling. So I thought he's got a great job, right? He flies around the world. He seemed to earn a fair bit of money. He stays in expensive hotels. He gets to go to all the best places. I thought that's the job for me. So that was where my career started. It coincided with, this is how old I am, right? 37 years in professional selling, Brian.
Wow.
37 years. Okay. So it coincided with the moon landings in 1969, which you wouldn't remember because you're much too young. But I remember watching all of these banks of computers and all these, mostly men, but some women, using this stuff to engineer this greatest challenge of all time, probably, to put a man on the moon, right? Yeah. That was so thrilling for me. So that's where my interest in technology came in, right? Those were the two things.
And what did your dad sell?
He sold defense equipment, radar equipment. So it was complex sale, very long sales cycle, could be years before you sold anything, right? And I was fascinated by the challenges around that as well, I think.
And so you liked the adventure of it, the challenge of it? Was that the motivation?
Yes, I was thinking about that before this call. What is it that really got me into sales? And I think I am, if anything, I'm a challenging person. I like to be challenged. I like to challenge other people. And I think that's probably my main motivation for being in the sales profession, really, to be honest with you.
Yeah. But and what did you study in school?
I studied, university was business studies.
Yeah.
So I was the career plan then, right? So here was the Kevin Thiele career plan in 1980. Was I was going to be? I thought there were two leading companies in the IT industry in those days. One was this great big blue company called IBM, where everyone seemed to wear a suit and blue tie and a white shirt. And the other was this upstart company called Apple. And I liked the Apple company because I felt they were different, right? They were challenging. They seemed to be exciting. They seemed to be new. So that was my plan. I really would have wanted to have joined Apple. I got as far as joining one of their dealers, a reseller partner, actually. And so that was my first experience of the technology sector. That was back in 84, I guess, 85.
Yeah. And what were some of the major epiphanies that you had through your career? I'm sure you kind of learned a lot along the way.
I have. Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, I think there were some classics that we all get from our old sales bosses, right? One of my bosses said to me, if you're on time for a meeting, you're 5 minutes late.
Yeah.
Right. I love that because you'll remember the actor Laurence Olivier.
Yeah, I heard
Sir
of
Laurence Olivier, Lord Olivier, right?
My grandparents told me. Yeah.
Well, he said the secret to acting was, you know what he said the secret to acting was, Brian?
Showing up.
Yeah, he said here, because someone asked him, they said, Lord Olivier, as he was then, how have you been so successful over such a long period of time? What's your secret? Right. And he said, it's turning up on time, knowing your lines, and not bumping into the furniture. Right. And he said, if you can do those three things, you'll likely be more successful than most actors. I think that applies to selling as well.
I think it applies to life.
It does. It does.
I can't tell you the simple, basic things. And everybody, I know. It's not knowing, it's doing.
No. Yeah, completely. Absolutely. So that was a big realization, right? That actually selling Didn't have to be the most complicated thing in the world. The second big realization was that although I've always been very good at talking, I always underestimated the benefits of listening, right? And that actually, no one's really interested in you, but we're all interested in us, right?
Yeah.
Fundamentally, the sad thing about human nature is the one person that we care about more than anybody is us. So if you can learn to understand other people, listen to them and see what they need, there's another big step forward in the sales process, I'd say. The last big epiphany, well, no, not the last big epiphany, but when I moved into sales management, which happened for me quite early, I was young, I was arrogant, I was overconfident. One of the much more mature sales guys, I was 27, he was 40. I thought he was ancient, right? When I was 27. He sat me down after I'd been managing him and this small team of salespeople. He sat me down in a meeting room, called me in for a meeting. And I said, this doesn't happen. You don't call me in for a meeting, right? This is back in the 80s, it is a whole different style of management. And he looked at me and he said, look, Kevin, he said, I need to tell you something. And I went, okay. I said, what's that? He said, you're not managing me right. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, look, you can't manage everybody the same way because we're all different. That was a big epiphany. I went back and went, wow, okay. The big epiphany moments are always really simple messages that resonate with you. And I've tried to apply that process to leading and managing teams ever since. And it's called coaching, right? So basically, training is a very generic thing, has its benefits in terms of getting skills into a workforce, into a sales team. But if you want to get individual performance, you need to coach people. And that's understanding what's unique about them. That was a big epiphany moment.
Well, let's talk about that. What do you see as the difference between coaching and training?
Training to me is much more about skills and knowledge, right? And selling is a skill. I don't subscribe to this view that salespeople are born, not made. I've known plenty of introverted salespeople, not the typical outgoing type like me. I'm what the people normally say, typical cheesy, glib sales guy. Right, overly confident, a bit brash, quite money motivated. I've known much more successful salespeople than me that don't tick those boxes because they've got the right skills. They've worked hard at it, right? So I think training is about skills and knowledge, which can be generic. And we all need certain skills in selling. We all need a certain amount of knowledge about the product. But coaching then takes the other part of it, and coaching addresses talent, attitude, and style. And those are the three other components of what makes a successful salesperson.
And which is the hardest to develop?
Well, I would say talent and attitude to me are the most difficult things, and they're very much related. And if I was to be really critical of my own sales career, in fact, my own career period, right, has not reached the dizzy heights I expected it would. Right? I didn't end up becoming the CEO at Apple or the head of sales at Apple or any of those things, right? I mean, I got to a level of leadership which satisfied me to a degree, but the reason I'm still doing this is because I'm now coaching other people that are going to get higher than I am. So I think it was attitude that held me back. Frankly, I think if there's one thing I would change about my career and about my approach to selling and sales management and sales leadership, it would be to have a better attitude than I had.
And can you characterize that? What was suboptimal about it?
Yeah, it's interesting. See, I'm a real competitive person, right? Now you know that salespeople tend to have that trait.
Yeah.
But I was a frustrated sports person. So because at school I was badly asthmatic as a child, so I couldn't compete on the sports field, even though I wanted to. And I think if I had, I think I would have learned much more about what it means to be in a team and have an attitude where we all win together.
Yeah.
So it took me quite a long time in business to learn what I probably could have learned in a couple of years on a school playing field. And I think we know that it's harder to change your mental processes later in life anyway. So I've come late to the party, right? That's my view.
So you were kind of like a lone wolf, sharp elbows.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I've always wanted to be in a team. I mean, I really do enjoy teams, but I don't think I really understood what it meant to be in a team because I've never, until I got into selling and leading and managing teams, I'd never played in a winning team because I didn't do that whole sports thing that a lot of salespeople do.
Yeah, because that is a develop. It seems very consistent.
Yeah,
There's some kind of team act, and it doesn't have to be sports. It could be drama, debating, something
yeah.
where they're relying on each other, and the whole is greater than the individual.
Exactly. Yes. And I really value that now. And I think I would have valued it more when I was younger if I'd had the opportunity to experience it.
But most, mavericks or lone wolves stay in as individual contributors
Hmm.
and just go for the money. Why didn't you do that?
I think because what I saw in I think the answer to that question is I got exposed to management, managing teams very early in my career.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why that happened. I probably wasn't even the best person to do it. You so often see successful salespeople get transitioned into management roles much too soon. But it happened to me quite early. So I'd only been really selling for 4 or 5 years, and I had a team of 6 people. And I wasn't really doing a great job with them, actually, in many ways, I don't think, because I wasn't very mature in my outlook. But I did notice I was able to help some people to really progress their careers. And that's something I've had more enjoyment from than anything in my career, actually. Just I could think of half a dozen people that I've hired that have gone on to great success in their roles. And I've had enormous pleasure out of that, enormous satisfaction in helping them to whatever degree. Because I think this one of the saddest things in life, Brian. I don't know what your thoughts are about this, but my view, one of the saddest things in life is to see people that don't get anywhere close to fulfilling their potential,
Yeah.
right? Because we've all got enormous potential as human beings, and then you see, so some people just leave a yawning gap between what they're capable of. I don't think personally I've left a yawning gap, but I definitely haven't got lived up to my own expectations.
And so that,
Which is, but the clock's still going and the race is still running, and I'm still in it. And if you look at what happened in America over the weekend, and I'm going to make any comments about either of those presidential candidates, but the youngest one of them was 74, right? And those
crazy,
guys
isn't
are,
it?
well, but I think it's great. I'll tell you why I think it's great. Because people ask me, why do people carry on doing those jobs and striving for high office and achievement at that age? And there's only one reason. And that one reason is because they love it, right? It's passion that keeps you going as you get older. So the reason I'm still plugging away at this business at my advanced age of 60, which would make me a spring chicken in that presidential race, is because I love it. I love the thrill. I love the chase. I love the competition. But more than anything, I've always wanted to be a key player in a winning team.
Yeah. I heard a famous quote, and I forget the exact wording, but it was like, the ultimate nightmare is to be faced with the person that you could have become.
Oh wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
wh- and when you
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
when you think about that, that really says, oh, well, which means that you're capable of it, and you chose not to do it.
I like that, but let me phrase that another way. Something else I heard which really resonated with me, which is the person that you think you are, right? Or the person that you want to be is the person that you really are, right? The person that you want to be is the person that you really are.
Yeah.
And I think that's our challenge in life is to be, and I suppose in the end, the race is long and really with yourself, right? I think that's from the sunscreen record. So that's not original Kevin Teeler copyright, but it's really true. Do you know that song by Baz Luhrmann? Everybody needs sunscreen. It's the valedictory address at a graduation ceremony in America, and it's basic rules for life, right?
Yeah.
And one of the rules is everybody needs sunscreen, right? But the other one is the race is long and always with yourself. And I think that's absolutely true. And that's what I'm doing. So my race is long, and I've been lucky enough to have a fascinating career over 30, nearly 40 years now, and mostly 37 years in the IT industry, watching all the change that's gone on there. But I'm still trying to be the best that I can be. And now my mission is really to be the best at helping other people to be the best they can be. Because I'm not going to be the fastest guy on the pitch. I'm not going to make the touchdown probably anymore, but I can help the quarterback to be that person now.
And you get to work on the fun parts.
Yeah,
Because, when somebody works for you, they're not coming to you for feedback.
correct.
When you have a client, they're paying to get your feedback.
Oh yeah, I do like that actually. That is, yeah, it is great, isn't
It's
it?
a very different.
Yeah, it is.
they may not like it,
Yeah.
but they're there.
Well, they're almost, I find when you charge people decent money for coaching, leaders typically the sort of people I work with, mostly leaders, usually sales leaders in the technology sector is my kind of target market. They're more inclined to listen to you when they know how they're paying you a decent bit of money for it, right? Okay, yeah, I'm paying for this. I better have it. I better listen to it and benefit from it.
Yeah, and I think it's turning into a bigger and bigger market because I'm talking to a lot of CROs and even CEOs, and the board or their executive team is just go do it.
Mm.
So they don't even have to, it's not their money anymore, which has its issues. But people are recognizing the value of being able to talk to somebody about their skill set, their attitude, and their talent.
Yeah.
And how to become better.
Mm-hmm. They are, yeah. I think typically in America, you lead the way in a number of things, right? This is one of the things you lead the way
Pretty much
in.
the whole world, yeah.
But you know, you definitely, coaching is a concept that has been established on the playing field for, you know, a sports field for many years, right? And it came into business probably 20 years ago in a big way. And usually you coached. There was a problem on the board. There was someone that had to be turned around. They were a bit of a pain in the backside. So it tended to be a negative kind of connotation towards it, but that's really changing now. And I think serious professional business leaders are realizing that they need some kind of, and even if it's just a feedback, you know, just a wall to bounce things off.
Yes.
It's really helpful. And I've certainly benefited from it. In fact, another one of my motivations for doing this is that I never really had a mentor in my business career. And I think that's partly because I was, you know, I think I was a bit of an ass. I don't think I would have listened to anybody else for half of my career. But I know that if I had found that person, and I did have managers that really did try hard to coach me when I look back. But I probably wasn't very receptive. You know, I should have been.
Yeah. I mean, I had a great opportunity very early in my career. I had just got into large enterprise sales, and my manager would travel to our office, and we would hang out at the office at night and then go to dinner together.
Oh, lovely.
And he at times would tell me the things I needed to know, like don't spike the football.
Yeah.
Right. You walk around the office like a peacock sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that is it, isn't it? It's telling you the uncomfortable truths. I think, isn't that what your podcast is called? Is
the brutal truth, because everyone in sales kind of fluffs over these things.
The brutal truth. Well, you see, that's I like that topic because it's not that I just like the brutal truth. I actually have a need for the brutal truth. I need to confront issues. I can't walk away from things unresolved, right? I feel uncomfortable if I haven't got that truth out on the table. In sales meetings that I used to run, we would call that the wet fish conversation. It's got a slightly bad smell, but let's slap it down on the table, you know? If you can't have that conversation, then you're not running a proper team.
And I think what the US is bad at right now is that, you know, everyone's feelings. Well, just because you feel it doesn't make it true.
No.
So do you want us to spend 6 months sugarcoating this until you really get it? Or do you want the brutal truth?
Yeah, I think the other way of looking at that is, and again, this isn't originally mine either, but you know, what is, right? The map is not the territory.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes our maps are faulty, and they're often, as you say, based on feelings and not on reality.
Yeah. And
so sometimes as a coach, what you do is you just shine a light, right? Let's shine a light on this darkness here, and let's see what we've got. Let's have a real good look at it.
Yeah. And you can save that person years of misery by pointing out a slight character flaw or tick in their personality that if they knew they had it, they can change it.
Yeah, completely. And it makes a big impact.
Yeah.
These small things, it's the small things that add up to a big thing generally. But I would say, yeah, it's attitude, Brian. I mean, attitude derives from talent. If you understand what your talents are, right? If you have a degree of self-awareness and couple that with I would say the other book that made a huge impact on me recently was the Carol Dweck book. The growth mindset. Yeah, it's just, that whole thing is just like, wow, you know, just massive.
Well, right, because you get so many people with limiting beliefs about victimhood
Yeah,
or this is the way I am.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, that's the way
yeah,
you are now. How do you want to
yeah.
be tomorrow?
Well, exactly. And if you think how long I've been in the IT sector, I've reinvented myself a number of different times now. This last incarnation is as we'll call it a coach. I don't like the word that much, but essentially that's what most people call it. I like to think I'm helping people to be as good as they need to be or they can be in their roles. But I mean, I've had to reinvent myself so many different times through so many different eras of just technology and stuff, right? And I don't think you can do that without at least having some kind of growth mindset and a willingness to learn.
Yeah.
You know, so here's a question I'd like to ask you. Actually, you're sitting in a virtual meeting room there, aren't you?
Yep.
Right. If you had like a dozen salespeople in that room, would you and then ask them to put their hands up? The last sales book they've read. How many people would put a hand up out of a dozen?
Um, I would say three quarters.
Oh, okay, really? Okay, that's quite high because that's not been my. Maybe that's
No.
America then, because in the UK
Well, I think
you
it's
wouldn't get more than yeah.
yeah, because I think people
Yeah.
go through stages. Like people in their 20s are reading books. People get
Right.
into the B player trap where they're okay.
Yeah.
They stop reading the
Yeah.
books and it has to be something outside of me that's wrong. The
Yes.
economy, the
Yes.
territory, my boss, the
Yes.
product.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And well, then you're in the victim mentality essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the answer is always within, isn't it? There's always something you can do about whatever situation you're in.
Well, it's the only thing you have control over.
Mm-hmm.
Can't change the
Correct.
economy.
No.
You can change your boss by getting a new job. You can change
Yeah.
the, but those are very hard things to do. Instead of like, okay, this is the problem I have. How do I solve it?
Yeah. Yeah. Man's Search for Meaning. You read that?
Yes.
Viktor Frankl.
Michael. Yeah.
Just astonishing story of a concentration camp survivor, isn't it? That was
Yeah.
his realization that the only thing that he had control over was his own reaction to the circumstances that he found himself in.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's another great book, really. So a lot of the books I like about selling are not about selling.
They're
I do
not.
read lots of books about selling, but actually, no, it's all this other experience, in fact.
Because I think a lot of it, like you said, comes down to, mindset and attitude.
Yeah,
Right? Talent's the only thing that a sales book is going to change.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
And honestly, the sales books that are out there are written by people who haven't sold.
yeah.
So,
That's true.
and
Yeah.
they tend to focus on, okay, that way's wrong, this way's right.
Hmm.
And it's like, and, and sales is by far the most complex profession out there
Yeah.
because you're dealing with people.
Yeah, completely. Well, that's an interesting topic in itself. I mean, as you say, most sales books don't talk about psychology,
Right.
right? I know there's a little bit in the Sandler sales about transactional analysis, which looks at people's different mental states, all that kind of stuff, which is really interesting. But most books don't go into that. So, but you're dealing with people who've all got different attitudes, concerns, issues.
Right.
And I think that's what's fascinating about selling for me. It's that aspect of it.
Yeah. And what is the most common thing you see when you with your clients?
The most common thing I see with my clients, I think, the higher up in an organization you get, and most of my work has been coaching leaders, sales leaders, it becomes increasingly lonely. And actually, they have fewer and fewer people as they get higher up that they can really talk to.
Yeah.
One of the things I love, by the way, I'm accredited as a Gallup certified strengths coach. Have you heard of the Strengths Finder assessment?
Yes.
And one of their questions that Gallup asks when they're assessing kind of organizational health of companies, they've got a survey which asks you, do you have a best friend at work? Right? It sounds a bit cheesy, but what that means is there somebody you can go to who's not in your team, who's not your boss, who's someone you trust within the company just to kick stuff around? And I'd say with leaders that's a real a problem for them. They very rarely have that person. You can't go down to your subordinates and say, I'm concerned about this. You may have trouble going up to your boss because he thinks you should know the answer anyway, right? So having an external source of reference that you can go to and say, I'm just this kind of, I'd say that's one of the big things. Most leaders, because they're at the top of a company with very few other people to speak to, it can be quite a lonely place to be.
And because there's a lot of noise on social about this right now, because to raise the money, they have to have big plans.
Yeah.
And then who has to fulfill those plans?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's right. It's the leader, isn't it? At the end of the day.
Yeah. And so they're going to hire people. Oh, and we don't want to spend a lot of money on people, but we'll hire a lot of entry level people.
Yeah.
Then it turns into a training nightmare.
Yeah. Well, that never works, does it? I mean, just getting a bunch of new guys in, I think there's a whole topic there around most companies spend a whole bunch of money trying to get the best people in the company, but then they spend very little in trying to get the best out of the people they've got.
Yeah. Yeah, and they think they can just churn them. But then you've got that gap from the time, okay, that person you decided failed. Now I'm going to get a new person. It's going to take, 3 months from the time you decide that to that time that person's even somewhat functional.
Yes, completely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, because there's a ramp at the end of the day.
Yeah, and there's a transition, and you hope you made the right decision.
Yep, completely. Yeah.
And what characteristic of the leaders have you found between the people who are going to make it and the people who aren't?
I think the people that make it, generally speaking, have that growth mindset more than anything else, that they're continually learning, right? They're never the finished article. I always want to get better. I'm not this kind of arrogant, puffed up person that knows everything. So I think that's probably the main thing. And a really good sense of self-awareness. What makes me special? Where can I really contribute? That's where the StrengthsFinder assessment comes in, that gives you an audit of what makes you great, what your talents are. And you combine that with a winning attitude and a continual desire to compete at the highest level. And because it is tough. I mean, this technology sales business is constantly changing. There's enormous pressures on people in that business. So resilience more than anything, I guess. And I think if I proved anything, I've got longevity, right? So there must be something about me where I'm quite a resilient person.
And have you dealt with somebody who just wasn't going to make it?
Oh, yeah, loads of times. Yeah, sadly, yes. I mean, completely. I've had to lay off people in my career. I've had to let people go. Sometimes because of economic factors, but sometimes because they weren't the right people. And I think, you have to, then you failed you have to recognize that you failed because you've either hired the wrong person or you've not supported that person properly. I mean, so at some point you failed. And I think generally speaking, the time to recognize that is as soon as it happens, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you can. And the longer you delay and you go, I'll just give that person a bit more time. She seems like a nice person. I'm sure she'll make it. Not really. It probably won't happen.
Just make the decision.
You're only delaying the inevitable. It's not helping anybody. Good salespeople don't always fit in one company to the next. That they need to be in the right environment,
right position.
Yeah, completely. And the classic one is hunters and farmers, isn't it? Where you've got someone and actually farming in big tech companies is a very important role. That sort of senior level account
especially
management.
Today in the SaaS space, right? The renewals.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's farming.
Yeah, I'm. I've never been. I've always been a hunter. I'm more of that kind of person. But that's my background.
Cool. Appreciate your time today, Kevin. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Well, as my wife says, there's only one Kevin Teeler. So if you look for me on LinkedIn, I think there are about 20 actually, but there's only one in the UK.
At least in her life.
Exactly. So go and find the one Kevin Teeler in the UK. It's Thiele for those people listening.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Hey, I want to make sure you're checking out B2BRevenue.com. That is where you can get a free copy of an ebook that I did. It's a real ebook. It's not a fluff book. It shows and talks about how companies make buying decisions and how you can influence that from both a marketing and a sales standpoint, how to find all the people that are in the decision path and what they need to see, know, and touch and feel before they make a product selection. If your team needs some coaching, some help, some training, some systems, some processes that do work today, because we know what doesn't work, or you know what doesn't work, I'll show you what does work and how to connect and get into pretty much any account. It includes deal coaching and content, community, and I can customize it for your particular company. Just go to b2brevenue.com, look under training, schedule a call with me. We can talk it over, or just sign up. You can pay per month or all at once, whichever makes most sense for your budget. Also, I put out videos pretty much daily on LinkedIn and on YouTube. On LinkedIn, it's Brian G. Burns, and on YouTube, it's Brian Burns Sales. Just search for that if you like to consume some video content. And if you see me on LinkedIn, please put a comment and a share and a like on some of the videos. I really appreciate it. I've got a company page for each podcast. This one, the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, where I put both content and humor videos out daily. And tell a friend about the podcast. Really appreciate you listening. Check out the show notes for all the partners and the connections you can make there, the coupon codes for the products to evaluate them, see if they're a right match for you. And we'll see you next time.